So think of all the advantages you get from using a mobile. I mean, there are almost as many mobile phones as there are people in the country now.
Absolutely right.
You should be talking to people about your mast.
My mobile phone could be giving me cancer.
Now what do I do?
I use my mobile phone a lot. You should see the size of my bills. But I worry about the health issues. Could it be that my phone is hurting my head as well as my wallet?
So are we using our phones too much?
Yeah, for about an hour and a half every day.
Quite a lot, really.
I'm just talking to people about phones. And I wondered...
Are phones frying our brains and giving us cancer?
Do you think they're safe?
A bit worried that I might damage my brain.
I do think I get headaches from using my phone.
And what about mobile phone masts? Are they making us ill?
I mean, there has been some proof, hasn't there? I think there has.
Everyone seems to be uncertain about their phones, but that clearly hasn't stopped us from using them. What's going on?
You don't know how they work inside?
No, not really.
No.
Not really that technical.
I'm going on a journey to find out as much as I can about my mobile phone and what the health risks really are. I'm going to try and find out whether or not I should worry about my phone.
Now, I haven't been messing about wasting my time. I have done some homework already. I've been researching the subject, and from what I can discover, it must be on people's minds, because there's just a huge amount of information on the subject. The problem is a lot of it, really, is a bit complicated and a bit specialised, but I found one really useful thing, which is this. It's the Stewart Report, an independent report commissioned by the government that looks into the subject in serious detail. 160 pages, 7 chapters, and yes, I am working my way through it. It's a bit of a dry read, but there's a lot of information in here about how they actually work.
In my research, I have at least found out that they use radio waves. Well, I used to work in radio, which is why I'm going to Radio Oxford to see if they can help. Now, apparently the frequencies that mobiles use are very close to microwave frequencies, which might explain why your ear gets hot sometimes. And it certainly explains my unusual idea for an experiment. I'm going to use an egg. All we need is for everyone in the newsroom to connect their mobiles up and see if their microwave effect will cook the egg.
Oh, they're having a meeting to discuss it. What we'll do now is set a timer going. How long do you give an egg?
Oh, 3.5 minutes normally.
No, I'm going to give it 10, hard-boiled.
Well, while that's cooking, test number 2. Why does my ear get hot? My mate Tim has volunteered to help. He's got his hand over one ear and his phone over the other. And after 5 minutes, the verdict is... Ear 1 is 37 degrees and ear 2...
I make that 37 as well. So they're exactly the same. Oh, there, that's hair. Oh, that's skin there, look at that.
So I guess that when my ear gets hot, it's not really because of anything the phone is doing, it's just because you've got something over your ear. But that's on the outside. What about the inside?
Right, time's up. Let's have a look at our mobile phone microwave. Actually quite nerve-wracking, because if this is cooked... Oh,
Right.
That's nothing. There's, oh, just pour it in, you can just see there's no signs of cooking whatsoever. I don't know if I'm disappointed or pleased, to be honest. Well, that set my mind at rest, that it's not actually going to cook my head like a microwave, even though the frequencies it operates on are close to microwave frequencies. But what other effects might it have on my head, or anything else for that matter? And what about the long-term effects? And that's where it gets confusing with all this research. But before I leave here, there's one other thing I wanted to look into, because as I've gone through all of this stuff, there's one name that has kept on coming up, and I want to talk to him. It's this name, Roger Coghill. Now, I've got his number here, so I'm going to call him.
From what I've read in my research, Roger sounds like a bit of a pain in the neck for the mobile phone industry. He's done tests which he says show that their radio waves harm our immune systems.
It's having a physical effect on cells. Is this why people talk about there being a worry of them causing cancer?
Yes, because what our immune system cells do is to protect us from cancer. And so if they're not doing their job properly, it means that the likelihood of cancer can thereby be increased.
So, Roger, are you saying that my mobile phone could be giving me cancer then?
I think in normal use, there's no evidence that mobile phones are hazardous. But
what's
what
normal
can happen,
use?
by that I mean a 2 or 4 minute phone call.
What seems to be happening is when people make very long
phone calls, let's say 20 minutes, that gives the radiation enough chance to damage cells irreversibly, and that is what I think is the concern.
Hang on, 20 minutes. I've got one of my recent phone bills here, Roger, and there are lots of occasions when I've been on for 20, there's one here for 45 minutes.
Well, every mobile phone should carry a warning label, just like every cigarette packet, to say that excessive use
could be hazardous to health.
Really?
In a nutshell, yes.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Roger, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, goodbye. That actually was quite worrying. I mean, he's talking about real physiological effects. That's a bit scary.
If Roger's right, that is terrifying. But to be honest, most of my other research really doesn't back that up. So before I chuck my phone away, I'm going straight to the top. Professor Colin Blakemore is one of the scientists behind the Stewart Report. Remember my bedtime reading? I've set up a meeting, and I'm going to get some answers out of him.
Professor Blakemore.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Richard.
Hello, Richard.
All right if I call you Colin?
Some people come across as very certain. I chatted to, there's researchers like Roger Coggill that I spoke to. Now, he sounded pretty convinced. He told me it would give me cancer while I was on my phone. And that's a big word. People get immediately panic-stricken.
Well, now, one has to qualify this. There have been a lot of studies of people who've been exposed to mobile phones for a long time to try to see whether there's a higher rate of cancer. And the majority of these studies just simply say no.
Do you use a phone?
Yes, oh yeah, with enormous benefits. I think everybody, and this is important, everybody does a cost-benefit analysis in their head before they do anything.
I understand that,
so
but
think of all the advantages you get from using a mobile phone.
But
that's why they're so popular. There are almost as many mobile phones as there are people in the country now.
Absolutely right.
Because there's such tremendous benefits.
Where it gets difficult for the likes of me in making this programme is I'll talk to you on one side, discounting stuff that somebody on the other side will say, nah, it's going to give you cancer. Now what do I do?
At the edges of science, there isn't established fact. That's what experiments are about. They're about discovering the truth. And until the truth is discovered, then there are bound to be differences of opinion.
But that's useless to me. I don't want to wait 20 years until they discover the truth. What should I be doing in the meantime? Well, the report that Colin worked on does have very clear advice. It says that we should all keep our calls short. Yeah, right. Well, I'm not doing that, are you? And there is one group of users that the report says could be at even more risk: children.
Children are going to be exposed, by definition, since they're young, are going to be exposed over a longer period of time than adults.
They're the first generation growing up with these things.
Growing up and being exposed to the whole of their lives.
Exactly. We've got our first ones as adults.
As long as we don't know whether there are these possible cumulative effects, perhaps we ought to be a bit cautious about kids.
So, Colin, and therefore the government, actually own up to just not knowing what effect the phones might have on children, and their advice is that they should use them only when absolutely necessary. Right. Only thing is, no one seems to have told the kids. Every time I see one, they've got a mobile glued to their ear, permanently.
This is Sharnbrook Upper School. I'm going to talk to some of the kids here, find out if they've got mobile phones, how much they use them, and also if they know anything about the health risk. All right, have you got a mobile phone? Anybody else? How much do you reckon you use them?
Every day.
How much is...
10 a week.
Do you use them a lot?
Yeah.
How much is a lot?
About 15, 20 quid a month.
Younger people should use them really only for emergencies. But you haven't heard about that?
I've heard that the radiation waves could cause cancer or something, but I'm not that worried about it.
Well, this lot seem like fairly typical teenagers, and they've clearly got no idea that they should be limiting their use. And you know what? I don't want to be the one to tell them.
I want to be a teacher. No, I don't.
If it's the government's advice, then I think they should be telling people. Well, according to them, they are. All this information is in a leaflet that should be given to people when they buy a mobile phone. Well, clearly these kids haven't seen it. But what about their parents?
Because of the Stewart Report, I just assumed that it was now okay, that everything had been sorted.
So you've heard
and there
of
was
the Stewart Report?
I've heard of it and took a slight interest, but not an enormous interest.
When you, as parents, bought a phone, were you there when... Did you buy
Yes,
it?
I bought the phone for a show now.
Was your daughter with you?
Yes.
So they must have shown you this?
No, this is the first time that I've...
None of that was
First
spoken
time
about?
that I've seen that.
How does that make you feel?
Dreadful. I'd like to have a copy.
You can have that one.
Thank you.
I think this is important. Information should be freely available, and these leaflets seem like a good way to inform people. So, I'm sending out 3 15-year-olds to see if they can track any down on the high street. They should be easy to find, because all the retailers have agreed to distribute them on the advice of the Stewart Report. So are they as good as their word? Our spies, Tom, Francesca and Claire, have been out searching in the top 6 outlets. What did they discover? I've come back to the school and I've brought Colin Blakemore with me. Remember, he of the Stewart Report, to find out.
What did you actually ask them in the shops?
Well, we went into Assistant and we asked for a hands-free kit because our mum was worried about the health scare.
Right.
And after them giving us the hands-free kit, we actually asked them, so what do you think about this health scare problem?
Mm-hmm. And what did they say?
Orange's reaction straight away, they said, well, there's a bit of a health sort of scare and everything, and here's a leaflet about it, and they actually gave us
leaflet. Oh, look at that! There it is. Familiar sight.
That was from Orange.
The other 5 didn't really know what to say to us when we asked about the health scare, and
they
didn't give us a leaflet. They didn't explain to us really anything about health.
How does it make you guys feel?
It's not very good, not very good at all, not really.
Yeah, because if you're going to go in and get a phone, you want to know that it's going to be okay and it's not going to damage your health.
And how does it make you feel?
It's a bit disappointing, isn't it, really? That was one of the main recommendations from the Stewart Report, to inform people.
Right, I think it's about time I found out what the retailers have got to say for themselves. So I'm going to call them.
And since I'm on the mobile, I'll keep it short.
Right then, here's what I found. Vodafone, well, they didn't feel they could comment, so that's interesting. Then the Link I spoke to, now they said that they do stock the leaflet, but they don't feel they have to give them to people. Then I spoke to Phones for You. Now they said that they would stock it if they could, but since 2002 they haven't been able to get hold of any of the leaflets. Well, that's very strange, because I did, and also Orange clearly managed to get hold of them, so I don't understand that. Carphone Warehouse and O2 both admitted that perhaps they should have been better at distributing the leaflets, and, encouragingly, both said that they will try and be better at it in the future. So that is kind of good news. Basically, the next time you're in a mobile shop and buy something, if you don't get given one of these leaflets, make a fuss, because you should be.
Right, so if the phone companies aren't going to give out good advice, then I guess it's up to me. I've consulted expert phone testing company RFI and come up with some tips for the cautious mobile phone user.
Try and hold it a little bit away from your ear. It doesn't look like much, but it will make a difference. Get a hands-free kit. That way the mobile phone will be further from you, which means you'll get a lower dose of radiation. And lastly, a top tip for when you're on a tube or a train or anywhere where your mobile phone signal is low. Because when that happens, your telephone is working extra hard to find a signal. So whether you've got it to your ear or storing it on your belt, it's going to be pumping out radio waves regularly as it looks for that mast. So, best thing is, switch it off and use it again later. So what have I learned? Well, the jury is still out on mobile phones, but of course, if you're really worried about your phone, you could always just chuck it in the bin. There is one thing you can't do anything about, though, and it's the other side of the mobile phone equation, the masts.
So next, I want to find out about them. What I do know is that they're always on, pumping out radio waves all the time, and they're everywhere. Each one is owned by one of the big network operators. Now, I couldn't find any evidence in my research to say that they're harmful, but thousands of people up and down the country disagree. Like the residents of Essington, I've read about them in the paper, and their village is bristling with masts.
And living here, right under the shadow of a mast, is Sylvia Wright.
Sylvia reckons there are up to 28 base stations in her area.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hello.
I'm Richard.
Hello, Richard.
Can I come in and we can have a chat?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do that.
The ones closest to her went live about a year ago, and since then, Sylvia has noticed a number of health problems.
I do suffer symptoms which I hope are just superficial. But who's to know? Who's to know whether these symptoms, which appear to be not too serious, I get back pain, headache, It can be anything. It can be like at different times and depending on the amount of emissions. But I do actually feel these emissions in my body.
Sylvia's so worried that she's bought a piece of kit which allows her to monitor these emissions. In the house, it doesn't go off at all.
We've actually shielded the ceiling. This used to go off in here.
Right.
You'll hear it as we...
Straight away, as I go out, it's that. That's the mast.
Yeah.
That is quite scary, really, to think that it's the effect that's having.
It is when you're living in it, yes.
Now, I'm going to turn that off. You are marshalling quite a campaign about this, aren't you? And about that very mast up there.
Yes.
And that's the meeting that you've invited me to this afternoon to come and have a look at. Well, let's go to that then. I'll leave this on your work surface.
Now, T-Mobile have been to the village before, but they failed to reassure the residents. So I invited all of the operators to come with me. Sadly, none of them was prepared to do so.
What we wanted to do mainly today was to ask you for your feelings on the base stations we've got.
Why should we in Essington have to have masts in order to cater for those networks?
We are concerned about the hotspots, we are concerned about the emissions and the accumulation of emissions.
That is going to be a cause of illness, which the scientists are denying at the moment.
It has become a major problem.
Well, in November I was diagnosed with breast cancer. There's no history of breast cancer in my family, so, you know, where's it come from?
Do you think the mast on the water tower has affected you?
Oh, definitely.
This is difficult, but after a while, I can't help but wonder, are these symptoms due to the masts, or is it something else?
Nobody knew anything about it.
Why are we horrified, though? I mean, if we don't know anything about it.
All of a sudden these things were happening and we knew nothing about it, you see.
No one's been listening to the people who have the fears. It has been said that the fears are ungrounded, but people know their own body and they know when they're getting aches and pains for no apparent reason.
They are obviously, genuinely scared in there. And it makes me cross because whether or not their fears are justified, that's not the point. The point is there shouldn't be a village hall full of people who are properly scared of these things, who feel they were thrust upon them and who don't have the facts. There's no scientific stuff, there's no statistics about the effect it's had on the village. What they need is more research.
You know, once you start noticing them, they are absolutely everywhere. There are tens of thousands of them, huge herds of masts roaming the countryside. And in the UK, almost no scientific research has been done into their effects. So I've decided I want to do something about that. I'm just not sure what. But I am off to get some advice from top psychology professor Elaine Fox at Essex University. She's about to start a huge research project into the effects of masts, and I hope she can help me.
Thanks a lot for helping me with my project, but before we talk about that, just tell me a bit about what you do.
OK, we're really looking into whether or not mobile phone base stations have an effect on people's health and memory and attention and cognitive functioning. So what we're doing is we're actually building a special electrically shielded lab in order to test people, and so we'll be starting in about September.
Well, I can't wait till then, but Elaine's given me some advice about a test I can do in the meantime. First, I need 10 students for my experiment. So I've sent out an email to the whole of Essex University asking for volunteers. Next, I need a place, and I think I've found it. It's a hideaway retreat in Suffolk, very secluded, and there are no phone masts for miles around. So now, all I need is a mast.
You have no idea how hard it is to get hold of a mobile phone mast. None of the major mobile phone providers were interested in being involved, so I've built my own from scratch. Well, when I say I've built it, the electronics department at Essex University have built one for me. Then I had to jump through a load of hoops to get the thing put up. Had to get a license from Ofcom, the regulators for the mobile phone industry. Had to go to the planning people, the parish council, and then I had to go around and visit all the people living in houses around where the mast would be.
Actually, I consulted the locals more than phone companies usually do before they put up a proper mast. Anyway, now that I've jumped through all the hoops, I can get our engineer Dorian to switch the thing on.
Right, and here it is. This is our mast.
That's the actual aerial, so we'll just wind it up.
So this, I was going to say fake. It's not a fake, is it? It's a working replica.
No, it's in every respect a full, proper mobile phone base station. The only difference being you can't make a call on it.
So we lock that off.
Yeah, lock it off, make it safe.
And then leave our very own mast to do its thing. Excellent. Right. Good work.
Cup of tea time, eh?
Yes, I think you're right.
And time to start. Now, what we want to know is whether the presence of my mast will have an effect on the student's health, either because of radio waves or because of fear. Nothing quite like this has been tried before, so the results should be interesting.
Now, I have been a little bit crafty here because they've been told they've got a day to acclimatise and then the mast will be on for the first 6 days and off for the last 3. But actually, it's going to be the other way around because it'll be off for the first 3 days and then on for the last 6 days of the experiment. So, let's see how they get on.
At first, everything seems fine, but it doesn't last, and by the end of day 1, my mast is causing problems.
One of our guests has pulled out before the mast was even switched on. He took one look at our antenna and decided it wasn't for him.
Every day we test our guinea pigs to see if they're suffering from any of the symptoms linked with phone masts. We also take their blood pressure and we carry out memory tests to see how well the brain cells are working.
Why did I choose to take part in this experiment? It sounded like fun, get me away from my flat for 10 days, and this is much better than how I'm used to living. Health-wise, I feel fine.
So remember, the mast isn't on yet, but our guinea pigs think it is. And after a couple of days, there are some interesting effects. One of the housemates, Ches, is ill.
My joints, my knees and my wrists have got a lot worse. My eyes have been a bit itchy. I had some trouble focusing while I was reading. Loss of appetite.
Do you think that it's because of the mast?
Yeah, I think I've been trying to avoid the fact that, but it's becoming inevitable now. I think, I've got to put the blame somewhere.
But Ches is wrong. His symptoms can't have anything to do with the mast because we haven't turned it on yet. All the volunteers think it is on though, and it's having an effect on some of the others.
I've noticed headaches, maybe some anxiety or a runny nose or something, and maybe I have those normally and I just disregard them.
I have heaviness in my head and like a warm sensation.
Suddenly here it happened that I had these headaches two times, very one closer to the other.
Interesting. So, it's 4 days in, and without our guests knowing, we've finally turned the mast on. We're halfway through. Now remember, the mast is on, but the students think it's off. Try and keep up. Everyone seems to be feeling fine, except poor Ches. We've had to get the doctor to come and see him. He diagnoses flu, and that makes Ches stop worrying about the mast.
To begin with, I did think that it could be due to the base station, but now I'm not so sure. I think it's just a coincidence that I happen to be here as well as have the flu.
It seems that Ches has stopped blaming the mast now that the doctor has given him a different explanation. Despite the mast pumping out radio waves for the rest of the test, our guinea pigs seem to remain symptom-free. On day 10, the experiment is over. The last of the students is leaving and the results have been collated.
So what conclusions can we draw from this about any effects that radio waves from masts do have or don't have on people?
It certainly does look like the mast or the radio waves on the mast didn't have much impact, because when we looked across the days when the radio waves were active, it didn't really make much difference compared to the days when they were turned off. However, obviously we're just looking at one mast, and often in real life settings there's maybe 10 or 12 different masts in a location.
What interests me particularly is actually Ches's case, because we know he had real symptoms. He had a cold, so we know he really did feel rough.
Yeah.
But he subsequently blamed it
on the mast. And that's
right.
kind of what happens, I suppose, in real life.
I think that's a very interesting issue. There is a lot of research showing that if people do become ill, obviously you will think, well, why am I ill? So people will attribute those symptoms to whatever they think is around. And he had been told the mast had been turned on, so it was a very natural thing for him to attribute those symptoms to the mast.
It's just something we do. We lock onto something and we blame it for that. And I mean, you can physically see the thing.
That's
so
right,
you assume
exactly.
That's why I'm feeling
Exactly,
rotten.
that must be. I feel rotten, so it must be because the mast is on. And yet, as we've seen, it didn't. The radio waves themselves didn't seem to have much impact.
So without the mast, odds are it just has said, "I've got a cold."
Exactly.
That would have been that.
That's right.
So after 10 days and all of those tests, I couldn't find anything to show that masts have a physical effect. What amazed me, though, was how worrying about the mast made people feel. And it's got me thinking, could the worry and the lack of information be the real problem for people living under the masts? I wanted to go back and put this to Sylvia in Essington.
I want you to know that what I'm not doing is coming here and saying your symptoms are anything other than absolutely genuine. I want you to know that.
I think this is a very difficult thing, and some people do fear and have symptoms because of that fear. But some symptoms you cannot think yourself into. And I do experience some of those symptoms myself.
What if they turn out to be safe?
If they turn out to be safe, I would be only too happy. I am afraid that the opposite is true.
So Sylvia is very sure, but I'm still confused. I decided it was time to talk to the mobile operators, the ones who put the masts up. Could they explain why so many people all around the country, like Sylvia, feel that these masts are ruining their lives?
Guess what? It's the same old story. All of them. Orange, T-Mobile, O2, 3, Vodafone. They all declined to comment. So I contacted their trade association. They're based here in these buildings. And they wouldn't talk to me either. They did send me a statement in which they said all of the research, or most of the research, points to masts not being dangerous and bad for people. But that's not what I'm disputing. This is an issue about communication. They then in here go on to say that local communities are talked to where necessary. Well, that's hardly the experience of the people I met in Essington, scared out of their wits by these things, is it? Needing information. This is the communication industry, and they won't talk to us. So, I've got my own message for them.
You, up there, in your...
What's your problem?
We've asked you to move.
Sorry.
You at your desks.
Sorry.
Communication people. Mobile phone people. You shouldn't be sitting there at your desk sending me faxes.
They're not in.
You should be talking to people about your masts.
We asked you to
You are the communication industry. You can't just put these things in our communities without talking to us.
Well, they clearly aren't worried. But what about me? What do I know now that I didn't know when I started? Protect and inform yourself, because no one else is going to do it, particularly not the phone companies.
You! Anybody!
And kids, the government advice is use your phones for essential calls only, or stick to texting.
And as for the masts, well, as long as the operators are going to continue to site the things next to where we live, then surely they owe us a duty of openness and absolute frankness.
So where does that leave us?
Perhaps the one thing I really have learned is that sometimes worry itself can be the real problem.